I dedicate this teaching to my friend Rachel Pollack, who was scheduled to go home and then wound up with a systemic infection, and she's back in the hospital. So I pray for her healing. So I title this talk as How We Scored on the Ultimate Test. I am deeply grateful to Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks for learning the deeper meaning of the binding of Isaac. As we know, all of life is a test. If it were real, we'd know what to do. In Abraham's case, he knew with complete faith in God what the outcome would be. In our case, each year we wrestle with what seems like an ungodly request, even though we know the outcome. Just keep reading and you know we didn't do it. So in chapter, there are a lot of quotes from Rabbi Sacks, so unless otherwise noted, I'm quoting him. This is me. Chapter 22, verse 1, we read that God tested Abraham, and then Abraham responds, Hineni, here I am. This is a formula of many of the tests in Torah. Abraham doesn't hesitate to tie his son up to sacrifice him, but God doesn't want a child sacrifice. Child sacrifice was done in ancient times because children were just seen as objects or property. The binding of Isaac is a polemic against child sacrifice. This moment in Torah is the declaration of people's autonomy. Children are not to be treated as mere possessions to be sacrificed to appease the spirits of ancient ancestors. They are to be considered as human beings in their own right. Rabbi Sacks. What God was doing when he asked Abraham to offer up his son was not requesting a child sacrifice, but something quite different. He wanted Abraham to renounce ownership of his son. He wanted to establish as a non-negotiable principle of Jewish law that children are not the property of their parents. That is why 3 of the 4 matriarchs found themselves unable to conceive other than by a miracle. The Torah wants us to know that the children they bore were the children of God rather than the natural outcome of biological process. Eventually, the entire nation of Israel would be called the children of God. As long as parents believed they owned their children, the concept of the individual could not be born. The fundamental unit was the family. The Torah represents the birth of the individual as the central figure in the moral life. Because children, all children, belong to God. Parenthood is not ownership, but guardianship. As soon as they reach the age of maturity, children become independent, moral agents with their own dignity and freedom. Back to me. Let's look carefully at chapter 22, verse 2. Kochna, please take your son away to the land of Moriah and bring him up there for an olah, which we read as sacrifice. And na is please, please. It's like really he's pleading. God is pleading with Abraham. Now aliyah means to be exalted. It's related to the word, olah means to go up. And aliyah means to be exalted. Which is a related word. Also, aliyah is a Torah honor, or to immigrate to Israel. Another related word is elyon, supreme. So God tells Abraham, take your son, the one you love, go up. And you're going to go up to a mountain, and that's where God resides. I mean, indigenous people all over see the mountain as God. So it's like if I say, somebody says to me, take your friend, the one you love, to lunch, it doesn't mean I'm going to eat her, it just means I'm going to take her to lunch. Another cool thing is that the phrase lech lecha, go out, go to yourself, remember last Parsha? It's repeated here in this sentence. So there's continuation. There's this sense of going deep into one's knowing. So God is reminding Abraham to look within his inner knowing and that there's a plan behind the plan. Rashi comments on the phrase kochna. I beg you, pass this test for me so that people will not say that the first 9 tests were totally insignificant. Rabbi Sachs goes on to say, specifically, Abraham was chosen to be a role model as a parent. God says of him, for I have chosen him so that he will instruct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. How could he serve as a model father if he's willing to sacrifice his child? To the contrary, he could have said to God, if you want me to prove to you how much I love you, take me as a sacrifice, not my child. In verse 22:3 we read, Abraham got up early in the morning and saddled his donkey. Now this is, if you're going to sacrifice your child, you're not going to saddle up your donkey and go ahead. You're going to delay as much as possible. But here it says he got up early in the morning and saddled the donkey. So he's ready for this. And it's not a job he would normally do, but he does this to enforce the concept of his enthusiasm, which means filled with God, for the task at hand. Had he not been in on the fact that this was just a test, he would have delayed. But he knew better than to believe that God would have first promised to make him a great nation, only to do a bait and switch on him and have him renege on his promise. And isn't that so much of what life is like? We have challenges that overwhelm us, and we think, no way can we prevail. And then there's some little coincidence, which is another way of saying God, occurs, and everything works out. In hindsight, we see that once again our faith was being tested, but in the moment we were gripped with fear and trepidation. In chapter 22, verse 5, we read that Abraham says to the 2 young men who were to accompany them, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy will go up further. We'll prostrate ourselves and return to you. Note the pronoun we will return to you. Right here is proof that this experience is the 10th of God's test for Abraham. Not truly an instruction to kill his son. Now, let's consider the ram, who plays a significant role in this allegory. The Talmud cites several miraculous things that were created before creation, before the primal light. The Mishnah teaches that God created the ram to be sacrificed in Isaac's place. Otherwise, it might seem that if the ram had not gotten caught in the bushes, Abraham would have been allowed to sacrifice his son. Surely, this ram was created prior to creation itself. His role was of considerable importance. There's more to this story than the literal meaning. We are invited into Torah mind. A goat is a ruminant. It chews its cud because it has 4 stomachs. It really digests what it ingests. The word ruminant is related to the word ruminate, to think deeply, to meditate. The allegorical scene's message of the binding of Isaac, featuring this ram, is that God wants fully realized, autonomous people who think for themselves. And this is how we come close to God. Consider this and vote! Thank you.